Jake Thompson, a former soldier, returned from the brutal battles of war bearing invisible scars. His life had been marked by countless moments of tension and danger, along with the pain of loss from witnessing the death of many friends in the military, leaving him with indelible memories. After retiring, his greatest wish was for a peaceful life, a place where he could tend to flowers and care for dogs. Deep within Jake, the heart of a warrior continued to fight silently in search of peace of mind. The land Jake chose, truly, brought him feelings of freedom and happiness. His small house nestled amidst the lush green fields, exuding the fragrant aroma of blooming flowers. He devoted himself lovingly to his garden, savoring every delightful moment as he watched the blossoms unfurl under the warm sunlight. The dogs became his source of motivation to live, bringing warmth and joy that had long been lacking during his years far from family. However, just as the book of his life was about to turn to a new page filled with hope, something unexpected occurred. The Homeowners Association, HOA, appeared suddenly like an overwhelming storm with strict regulations and demands. The initial letters sent to him whispered like soft murmurs, but quickly transformed into threatening shouts. Jake received a letter demanding he change the design of his fence and move his gardening tools as if the private world he had painstakingly built was suddenly stripped of its protective layer. This cannot happen, Jake thought to himself, a rebellious feeling igniting within him. He was determined not to accept a predetermined fate. Instantly, a sense of comfort in his living space was replaced by anxiety and restlessness. Perhaps the reminders of the so-called privacy he had nearly forgotten in years of battle were waiting to flare up once again. The increasing presence of the HOA was not just a simple housing management group, but a force capable of controlling the lives of residents in the area, indirectly threatening the privacy he had worked so hard to protect. It felt as if Jake was facing not just an organization but an entire system. A system of surveillance regulations and people who could never comprehend the pain he had endured, day by day. Ever since receiving that first letter, Jake felt watched. The faces of his neighbors transformed from friends with whom he could share the joys of dog ownership and gardening into scrutinizing eyes casting themselves as observers in a strange experiment of power. In the evenings, when sunset descended and the sky lit up, Jake often sat by the fence in his garden, silently watching the surroundings. In the enchanting light, he reflected on all that was occurring. Why must it be so simple? Everyone has the right to live in the space they choose. Why does the government have the right to interfere in the minutiae of our lives? These endless questions cast him into a state of deep contemplation. Upon returning from a business trip, Jake stood at his doorstep. The vibrant green of the grass and flowers seemed to have faded. The fence he had carefully erected was now altered according to unreasonable regulations with which he did not fully agree. The fence surrounded his home like a cold armor, creating isolation rather than the peaceful living space he had always dreamed of. It felt as if he were being cast out of his own sanctuary, and the injustice of it all made it impossible for him to remain still. If no one stands up, things will only get worse, Jake told himself. Rather than accept a constricted existence, he resolved to seek support from his neighbors. He meticulously studied the HOA regulations, collected information, and predicted the next moves of this organization. The awareness from others was what he needed, and he was determined not to become their victim. The peaceful life he yearned for was at risk of shattering, but within Jake ignited an unprecedented fighting spirit. He was not only fighting for his own rights, but also for all the neighbors who were suffering under oppression. Thus began Jake's journey not just with flowers and dogs, but in a battle for freedom and privacy. The life that seemed tranquil suddenly transformed into a conflict without gunfire, where he and his neighbors chose to rise against the absurdities they would not accept being controlled. Together, they would build a community where each individual had the right to live the way they wanted. This fight was not only for Jake, but for the future of a community he had worked tirelessly to nurture. Jake Thompson, a former soldier with haunting memories from the battlefield, decided to embark on a new life in a charming little house adorned with fragrant flowers and friendly dogs. He dreamed of reclaiming peace after years spent amidst chaos and war. However, his simple joy was soon threatened by the Homeowners Association, HOA, an entity he never thought would become one of his greatest adversaries. On the first day, he received a letter from the HOA. Jake's spirits were heavy. The letter demanded that he alter the design of his fence and relocate gardening tools he had kept on his property. It felt as if a chill wind had swept into the warm life he had just begun to build. He couldn't understand why strangers believed they had the right to dictate the private space he had painstakingly transformed and cared for. The sensation of having his privacy invaded spurred Jake to seek support from his neighbors. He recalled their friendly faces when he first moved in, their smiles bridging the divide of conflicting interests. Thus, he decided to hold a small meeting with a few neighbors to discuss this situation. He wanted not only to clarify everyone's rights in the face of the HOA's imposition, but also to create a unified voice. However, the HOA's presence did not stop with that initial letter. They began sending a series of warning notices, each letter like a colder wind blowing against Jake's self-respect. He felt like a trapped animal increasingly surrounded by mounting pressure. Every time he saw the letters piling up on the table, it felt as though his heart was being squeezed. But rather than capitulate, Jake decided to break his silence. He researched the HOA regulations, every clause and rule drawing on what he had learned from the military. Nothing is impossible when we are well prepared for battle. Night after night, Jake stayed up studying documents diligently, taking notes and preparing for the impending fight. He reached out to his neighbors, gradually rallying them, not just for personal benefit, but for a shared cause. Little by little, the story of the HOA began to extend beyond his own home. Instead of feeling alone, Jake started to sense the connection and support from the community. His neighbors, who were facing similar demands from the HOA, began to approach him, and their conversations blossomed like the flowers in the garden he cherished. The first meeting took place at a nearby house attended by several friendly neighbors. They shared their experiences and realized they were all caught in a hidden trap set by the HOA. Tensions and concerns began to surface during the meeting, but Jake worked diligently to shift the atmosphere toward the positive. He encouraged everyone to believe in themselves and their rights, asserting that standing up for their living space was not a futile fight. Amidst the arguments and discussions, Jake sensed the situation escalating. The HOA recognized the resistance from him and the neighbors and responded with harsher measures. They continued sending warning letters laying out unreasonable demands, and even made appearances to intimidate, making Jake feel as if he were being watched every minute. However, instead of feeling crushed, Jake resolved to take bolder action. He decided to organize a small protest in the area, aiming to attract the attention of the local newspaper and community bloggers on behalf of residents' rights. This was not merely a protest, but an opportunity for the residents to make their voices heard and unite against the oppression imposed by the HOA. Preparing for this event was a significant challenge. Jake still remembered the haunting memories of his past, but he understood that this was the moment to reclaim his power and freedom. Together with his neighbors, he devised plans, designed banners, distributed flyers, and utilized social media to spread their message about the peaceful lives they were striving to protect. On the day of the protest, the atmosphere was electric, and many people turned out to support the cause. The media captured images of the jubilant residents making waves throughout the city's corners. It can be said that Jake's strategy exceeded all expectations. The small event attracted considerable attention, and the local newspaper published a detailed article describing Jake's life and the challenges he faced with the HOA. The words in the article truly resonated with many hearts. Readers began to speak up, sharing their own stories, and expressing their solidarity with Jake. Yet the story did not end with a single article. Jake realized that to truly achieve what he wanted, he needed solid evidence of the HOA's dubious actions. Like a soldier fighting for his independence, he began to gather all the relevant information documents related to the HOA's regulations, their internal meetings, and the unreasonable demands they had made. He sought legal counsel to prepare for a legal battle with the collective consent of the community. These steps were never easy, but Jake's determination ignited a flame of hope within everyone. Anxiety began to fade as people realized they were not alone in this fight. They had an entire army fighting for a shared ideal, and benefit Jake not only brought hope to himself, but had become a symbol of resilience and determination within the community. Consequently, each day they grew closer, overcoming every hardship together. Finally, when the court announced its verdict, everyone held their breath in anticipation. In that moment, the announcement appeared on the court's electronic board like a triumphant anthem. The court sided with Jake and the community of residents, compelling the HOA to compensate and cease its unlawful actions. Applause erupted like thunder, and people embraced one another, their emotions spilling over uncontrollably. They had fought for their freedom, and ultimately they had succeeded. Jake looked around, smiling at his neighbor's friends with whom he had shared countless struggles. He felt a wave of joy swell within him, not just for the victory, but for the bonds of friendship and camaraderie they had forged through tears and sweat. Now, not only was his own life restored, but a lovely community awaited the beautiful things that lay ahead. When Jake returned from his business trip, his heart felt heavy, not with the painful memories of the past, but with an indescribable sense of disappointment. The surroundings remained unchanged, yet they no longer resembled the living park he had once envisioned in his mind. His beloved home remained sturdy, but the warmth and tranquility it once provided had faded. The fence, a symbol of freedom, had now unexpectedly transformed into a crumbling wall, imprisoning his soul and dreams. Just a few days prior, while admiring the vibrant clusters of flowers he had planted, Jake felt a sense of calm. However, now, the fence surrounding his home felt like a narrow passage leading him into a dead end. It felt not only like a punishment, but also like a cold splash of water, extinguishing his hopes for a peaceful life that he was trying to rebuild after years of turmoil. Gazing at that fence, anger and a sense of intrusion surged within him. The fence not only made him feel isolated, but it also echoed a statement from the Homeowners Association, HOA, "You do not belong here." The strange and rigid regulations imposed by the HOA seemed aimed at controlling every aspect of the residents' lives. And Jake could not accept that. "This is not the life I desire," he told himself, his frustration growing by the second. He felt not only surveilled, but also stripped of the minimal freedoms each person deserves. Memories of lost friends. Memories from the battlefield resurfaced, forming a painful picture in his mind. Must he lose the peaceful sky he had longed for? The next morning, as the sunlight began to filter through the branches, Jake decided he could not sit idly any longer. He had fought for freedom before, and now he would not let his surroundings distort that concept of freedom. The action he needed to take was to connect with the neighbors, those who could stand with him against this oppression. Jake began to meticulously study the HOA regulations. He read every provision, carefully searching for loopholes to exploit. He wanted not only to protect his living space, but also to plan for the creation of a collective movement among other residents. Why not? Everyone has the right to live in a space where they genuinely feel they belong, and all he needed was a strong voice from those around him. When Jake met his neighbors, he realized that not everyone shared his strong opinion. Many were still apprehensive about the HOA's regulations, and his suggestion to hold a meeting did not seem to instill confidence in them. But this did not deter Jake. He focused on those who shared his voice, those enduring similar grievances as he was. "We are not alone. We just need to find the light in this darkness," he said. Day by day, Jake's meetings became more frequent. He discovered that there were others who had once stood up against unreasonable rules in the past, but had ultimately retreated under pressure. Jake wanted to be different. He wanted to strengthen the faith and support among the residents. Before long, their gatherings became a space for sharing a place where everyone found comfort and motivation from one another. But the HOA did not remain silent. Their anger grew, and they began sending warning letters to every resident in the area. These letters not only served as warnings about alleged violations, but also contained veiled threats about protecting the community. This only fueled Jake's determination further. He realized that to defeat an overreaching power like the HOA unity was essential. With each meeting, the story of the HOA became clearer. People began to realize that they were not alone, but stood on the same front line. "If we stand together, we will never fall," he declared with a resolute gaze. And this fight was not just his alone. It was a battle for the freedom of all residents. Armed with a clear strategy, Jake organized the first public meeting calling on all residents to attend. He invited lawyers, local journalists, and bloggers to discuss the residents' rights concerning the HOA. He understood that the only way to draw societal attention to this injustice was to bring it into the light. The meeting attracted considerable interest from the community and outsiders who had experienced what Jake and the other residents were facing. They brought forth their experiences, their stories of failure and success, making everyone feel that they were not alone in this struggle. When a local newspaper decided to cover the event, Jake knew that the fight had entered a new phase. It was no longer just his struggle. It had become a movement of resistance within the community. The spotlight began to shine on the deep-seated attitudes of strong opposition, and now those who had once been silent were becoming powerful voices. Jake's dedication had formed a robust movement, no longer merely a matter of individual rights, but of communal rights. After gathering sufficient opinions and voices from his neighbors, he declared, "We will need to take the HOA to court." And thus a memorable legal battle began to take shape. It was not just a fight over a fence, but a fight for courage, for the affirmation of human rights, the right to live a peaceful and happy life. Jake would not accept silence when his life was so profoundly intruded upon. The feeling of loneliness and isolation brought on by the newly erected fence haunted him like an obsession. He looked out the window where once he could gaze at blooming flowers, now laid a desolate emptiness imprisoned by cold wooden bars. This suffocating mood urged him to take action. With a whirlwind of conflicting emotions from despair to an explosive sense of urgency, Jake decided he could no longer allow the HOA to wield control. The promise of a beautiful life on his land now felt like a distant dream he could not reach. He began to listen to the call of his neighbors, those he believed shared his sentiments, yearning for a more liberated life, free from unreasonable regulations. For the first time, Jake organized a small gathering at his home. He sent invitations to all the neighbors around, intending to build a strong community. He wanted not only to discuss the grievances inflicted by the HOA, but also to seek solutions together. He meticulously prepared arranging seats, brewing tea, and setting out simple snacks to ensure everyone felt comfortable. On that day, as the neighbors arrived, Jake felt a glimmer of hope gradually awakening. Among them was Lisa, a young woman living near him, a middle-aged man named Sam, and the entire family of Susan, who had endured significant loss in her life. Each person's story brought its own unique hue, but all understood Jake's plight. As the meeting commenced, Jake endeavored to convey his feelings about how the HOA was imposing its will on the lives of residents. He shared the unreasonable letters he had received, along with the isolation he experienced after that fence was erected. Listening to his heartfelt confessions, people began to speak up, each sharing their own story, unraveling common pain in turn. Susan recounted how the HOA had demanded she remove the wildflowers from her garden, despite them being harmless and merely a part of natural beauty. Sam reminisced about how his dog was barred from public areas due to imposed regulations, causing heartbreak for his family as they had to keep it indoors. Lisa, a former soldier, shared how she could not host a birthday party for her daughter simply due to HOA noise restrictions. Each narrative echoed a unique suffering in their shared journey. Then, the atmosphere of the meeting began to shift. Jake's speech not only heightened the sense of empathy, but also stirred a spirit of leadership within the community. He proposed that everyone collaborate, not only to resist the HOA's unreasonable demands, but also to create a clear plan to protect their rights. If we do not stand up for ourselves, who will? He asked, his eyes shining with resolve. The more Jake spoke, the more the crowd rallied. Small applause erupted, encouraging the ideas he presented. He responded to questions, listened to concerns, and suggested creating a collective petition demanding that the HOA heed the residents' voices and cease its power abuse. But soon, resistance began to emerge. The HOA, with its authority, started to react. Warning letters from them not only increased in frequency but also sharpened in tone. Jake felt an increasing tension as he received notice that an unexpected inspection would be held to determine if he had violated any regulations, yet he felt no fear. The meetings with neighbors had sparked a new momentum for Jake and everyone involved. They were determined to stand up for their own rights and not allow the HOA to continue manipulating them. After discussions, they agreed to hold a small but meaningful protest in the community park. They decided to call on all residents to join in to show that they would no longer accept unilateral control from the HOA. On the day of the protest, Jake woke earlier than usual. He donned a t-shirt emblazoned with "The Right to Live Free." His breath was filled with excitement, laced with anxiety. He looked at the flowers in his garden, still blooming brilliantly as if oblivious to the troubles of humanity. When Jake arrived at the park, the morning sun shone brightly, reflecting the joy and determination within him. The neighbors had come, carrying their signs, banners, and personal messages. The event unfolded with speeches, songs, and stories from the community. Together, they asserted a powerful message. They needed the right to self-determination in their lives. The protest attracted media attention. A local newspaper sent a reporter to document their battle with the HOA. Jake felt elated to see the young faces in the community begin to post articles on social media spreading their message. This struggle was not just Jake's, it was a collective endeavor. After the protest concluded, Jake sensed a shift in their spirits. With each step taken, they built a trust and a connection stronger than ever. They were not standing up just for themselves, but also for those around them, those who needed to be heard, respected, and given a life of true freedom. Thus, the battle with the HOA transformed from a haunting nightmare into a noble mission filled with significance. Jake, not just a veteran returning from the battlefield, became a hero in the eyes of his neighbors, a catalyst rekindling the spirit of struggle and unity within the community. Their fight was not solely for personal rights, but about the belief that everyone deserves freedom in their living space. They proved that no matter how difficult the path may be, perseverance and solidarity would be the keys to unlocking the doors to freedom and happiness. Jake Thompson stood before the door of his home, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. After days of deep contemplation and solitude, he decided that it was time to take action. The battle with the Homeowners Association, HOA, was not just a personal issue. It had become a struggle for his own right to live as well as those of his neighbors. Standing amidst the beautiful space he had cultivated, Jake realized that protecting this home was not merely about paint or fences. It was about the freedom he had once fought to defend on the battlefield. The idea of a protest sprang to Jake's mind like a faint light glimmering in the darkness. He recalled his old friends who had sacrificed their lives for freedom, and all they desired was a peaceful existence. Determined not to let the HOA's regulations cloud his spirit and ideals, Jake began planning a concrete action to draw the community's attention. First, Jake needed the consensus of the neighbors around him. He started by meeting with each person, listening to their opinions and concerns about the current situation. Some expressed worry, while others felt powerless against the pressures from the HOA. However, Jake was undeterred. He decided to host a meeting at his home and sent invitations to every household in the neighborhood, calling for everyone to participate. Finally, the meeting day arrived. Jake's house became a gathering place for like-minded souls. As his neighbors entered, Jake sensed a palpable enthusiasm in the air. He took the microphone and began to share his experiences with the HOA, the pressures they were facing and the reasons why they should stand up to defend their rights. Each of us has the right to decide about our living spaces. He said, his gaze filled with determination. I have fought to protect freedom on the battlefield, and now I am fighting for freedom in my own home. Jake's speech captured attention. His neighbors, realizing they were not alone, began to share their thoughts. They discussed the strength of unity and offered good ideas on how to respond to the HOA. The meeting concluded with an agreement they would collectively organize a protest to attract the attention of the authorities and media regarding the issue. The protest date was established. Jake and his neighbors began preparing for the event together. They made signs, planned for the march, and assigned tasks to everyone. People from nearby households stood shoulder to shoulder, invigorated as if they were reliving the struggles for freedom of the past. On the day of the protest, the atmosphere became more vibrant than ever. People gathered at a park near the neighborhood, carrying banners and slogans. On each face, there was an unmistakable expression of unwavering determination. Small flags waved embodying the rights they were resolutely unwilling to relinquish. Jake stood in the midst of the crowd, feeling as if he were at the center of a new battle. His feet moved to the rhythm of the ideals of freedom, his heart pounding with expectation. We are not just standing here for fences or regulations, he shouted, but for our very lives, for the freedom to live the way we choose. The protest garnered significant attention from local media and community rights bloggers. They interviewed Jake, documenting his story and the hardships he and his community were facing. Images and narratives were broadcasted live, making it impossible for the HOA to ignore the strong support from the community. As the protest came to a close, the fervor still lingered in the air. Jake knew he had made a significant impact, drawing attention not only from the HOA but from the authorities as well. More importantly, the solidarity and powerful voices from the community had become a tremendous force. This not only made him feel supported, but also reminded everyone of their right to live. After the protest, Jake returned to the documents and regulations of the HOA. He researched the circumstances under which the HOA could be sued for disrespecting residents' rights. With determination and the strength from the community's unity, nothing could stand in his way. With the support of his neighbors, Jake began collecting evidence of the HOA's dubious actions, from warning letters to incorrect decisions and imposing regulations. He consistently listened and gathered information and disseminated it to everyone in the community, encouraging them to unite in support of this struggle. As Jake finalized his evidence, he concluded that the secret to success was not always strength, but sometimes wisdom. The HOA's regulations, though created with good intentions, had become overly stringent and out of control. Aware of this, Jake decided to file a lawsuit against the HOA, not just for himself, but for everyone who had lived under this oppressive control. This was more than just a legal battle. It was a public war of words. He and his neighbors prepared the necessary evidence to prove that the HOA had overstepped its boundaries of power. They were ready to engage in a meaningful fight to protect their living space and their rights to freedom. Jake felt his spirit brim with vitality. He was not just fighting for himself, but for all those whose rights had been violated. What he was pursuing was not just a peaceful life, but the right to live with dignity and free from oppression. The story of Jake and his community, a relentless struggle for the right to live freedom and unity, would not be merely a memory, but a legacy for future generations. With wise actions and determination, each person's heart knew that they would prevail, not just for themselves, but for all those who stood beside them. As time went by, Jake stood firm against the challenges posed by the Homeowners Association HOA. The pressure from this battle came not only from the authorities, but also from those he once considered his neighbors. The long days spent in frustration and discontent forged within him a greater patience. He realized that this struggle was not merely for his own benefit, but a fight for the freedom of an entire community. When the court began to pay attention to his case, Jake decided to focus all his energy on gathering evidence of the HOA's wrongful actions. He collected every letter meeting minutes, photos, and relevant documents he could find. Each piece of documentation served as a solid brick in the edifice of the fight he was building, fueling his motivation. If his patience was once tested solely by material hardships, it was now tempered by a higher purpose ensuring that his voice would not be silenced. One day, Jake decided to hire an experienced attorney specializing in community rights. This move was not only to bolster his legal capabilities, but also to demonstrate that he was serious about this endeavor. The attorney listened to Jake's story and recognized the determination in his eyes. After reviewing the documents, the attorney asserted that there were numerous strengths in the case and that Jake had a real chance of winning. "We will prove that the HOA has not only violated privacy rights, but is also managing this community through illegal methods," the attorney said with a confident smile. From there, the next plans began to take shape. What Jake needed was not just a verdict, but the support of the community. He could not face a well-structured organization like the HOA alone. Thus, he decided to organize a small protest in his neighborhood. What initially was a fleeting thought in his mind gradually transformed into a concrete action. Jake called all his neighbors, explained the significance of the protest, and called for their participation. Their support became a source of strength for Jake and reinforced his belief in his decision. The protest took place on a beautiful afternoon. Neighbors from all over the community gathered to join in. They carried signs expressing their dissatisfaction with the HOA, and their voices created a powerful atmosphere. Local media also arrived to cover the event, spreading the word about Jake's struggle not just within the community but beyond. As a result, the name Jake Thompson began to resonate with many. The difficulties did not stop there. The HOA reacted strongly to the protest, sending multiple warning letters to Jake and the participants. They declared that the protest was a violation of regulations, stating that citizens did not have the right to assemble without prior approval. However, instead of causing Jake to back down, these threats only fueled his resolve. Methodically and steadfastly, he recounted in neighborhood meetings that this fight did not necessarily need to be confrontational, but rather a collective effort to rebuild a living space that everyone had the right and duty to protect. As the legal battle commenced, Jake's heart resonated with each beat of his allies beside him. They were not just neighbors, they were friends who had shared these tense moments with him. Each meeting provided him with the feeling of building a second family where everyone not only listened to one another, but also shared their fears and hopes. After weeks of disputes and preparations, the day of the trial finally arrived. The courtroom was packed, nearly every seat was taken. Not only were Jake's neighbors there, but also many strangers had come to observe the proceedings. The atmosphere was chaotic yet inspiring. Jake walked into the courtroom, his chest filled with confidence and determination. He was not alone. He stood alongside those who had fought with him. Together, they had crafted a legend of solidarity. Every statement made by the attorney flowed with a powerful rhythm, clearly outlining the HOA's violations and advocating for the people's rights. Each piece of evidence presented illuminated the infractions tearing down the walls surrounding the HOA's monopoly. Jake felt his position not only as a veteran, but now as a leader in the fight for freedom. Finally, when the verdict was announced, the courtroom erupted with joy. The court had decided in favor of Jake, ordering the HOA to compensate him and cease its illegal actions. Emotions surged like a great wave, enveloping the pounding hearts with sweat and tears mingling in endless joy. Jake stood there looking around and seeing the glimmer of hope in the eyes of his supporters. He recalled the hard days, the sleepless nights, and everything that had transpired to reach this moment. What he realized was that it was not just he himself, but the entire community that had come together to defeat an unjust system. The restoration of ownership was not merely a personal victory, but also a revival of faith and hope for the entire neighborhood. Jake decided to transform the vacant land in front of him into a vibrant space for the community, the Garden of Freedom. A place where everyone could come together, nurture it, and enjoy the joy found in every blossom and blade of grass. It could be said that this was not just a battle, but a journey leading to the rebirth of a living space. Jake had discovered a new meaning in his life, not just as a veteran, but as a leader within the community, where they could rebuild what had been lost and create a brighter future for the next generation. Jake Thompson, after a relentless battle against the pressures from the Homeowners Association HOA, has finally found the light at the end of the tunnel. His new life has not only provided him with a peaceful place to cultivate his love for flowers and dogs, but has also opened the door to building a community relationship stronger than ever before. As the legal battles with the HOA came to a close, Jake's small yard transformed into a gathering place for the entire neighborhood. He planted an array of colorful flowers, from lavender's purple blooms to deep red roses, creating a truly beautiful and inviting garden. This space acted as a canopy under the sky, bringing warmth and closeness to everyone. Recognizing the desire for connection after months of upheaval, Jake decided to host a workshop in the Freedom Garden. He extended invitations to all his neighbors, from the young to the elderly. Welcoming everyone, Jake hoped that not only the chairs and tables in the garden would be placed together, but so too would the hearts of the community. On the day of the workshop, a gentle breeze carried the sweet fragrance of the flowers, and the warm sunlight made everyone feel more excited than ever. Jake stood in the garden, facing his neighbors, wearing a bright smile as he began to share. He spoke not only about his difficulties, but also encouraged everyone to share their life experiences, expressing concerns and worries, as well as long-held dreams they had yet to reveal. Each story carried a piece of the past. Yet in that moment, people seemed to find solace in using their painful memories to connect with one another. An elderly man shared the challenges he faced in caring for his garden after his wife passed away. A single mother talked about the pressures she encountered while raising her children in an unsafe environment. Their voices were not merely complaints about life, but rather valuable lessons about resilience, love, and solidarity. Once the stories were shared, the atmosphere in the garden changed completely. The laughter and empathetic glances not only brought joy to Jake, but also warmed the hearts of everyone present. They began to discuss ways they could build a better community, where connection and support became an integral part of daily life. Ultimately, Jake proposed the idea of creating a community garden. This garden would serve not only as a place for growing fruits and flowers, but also as a venue for gatherings, small celebrations, and cultural events. The idea was met with enthusiastic support. Volunteer groups formed, from gardening teams to playground construction crews and event organizers. Everyone joined hands to help realize a dream they once thought impossible. One day, as the community garden project was about to kick off, Jake felt a rush of excitement flood his heart. He walked around the garden, admiring the blooming flowers and recalling the losses he had endured. However, it was undeniable that all those hardships had led to the wonderful outcomes now before them. The groundbreaking ceremony was simple, yet meaningful. Jake stood before the community, thanking everyone for supporting this project, and more importantly for what they had built together. We are not just creating a garden. We are establishing a space for connection, friendship, and sharing. Jake proclaimed, his eyes sparkling with joy. The neighbors planted the first seeds in the garden, each leaving their mark by placing name tags next to the flowers or plants they had grown. As the seedlings began to emerge from the soil, they represented not just greenery, but in reality, relationships, memories, and hopes for a brighter future. Over time, Freedom Garden became more than just a place to grow plants. It turned into an ideal venue for various community activities, such as local farmers' markets, small concerts, or craft classes for children. Each week, Jake and the neighbors would organize a friendly gathering, cooking, storytelling, and sharing their lives. Evenings spent beneath the flickering lantern light in the garden became an essential part of daily life. People laughed, shared meals, and created cherished memories. Friendships and connections grew, like the plants in the garden, flourishing each day, vibrant and resilient. The previous quarrels and conflicts between neighbors now turned into humorous anecdotes, with everyone learning to respect, share, and understand one another more deeply. Jake was not just a connector, but also a friend, a leader whom everyone admired. As he observed the positive atmosphere and close-knit bonds within the community, Jake reflected on the lessons life had taught him. There was no need to fight alone in times of struggle or pressure. Together, they could forge a powerful force. Unity is strength, he thought to himself, content with what he and the community had overcome. The garden was not merely a place to nurture plants, but also a sanctuary for nurturing hearts, dreams, and hopes for a brighter future. Jake had finally found not only himself, but also a family within this small community. A space where everyone worked together, overcoming difficulties to create a living environment that was not only safe, but also filled with love and sharing. From then on, life was not just about existing, but also about loving, helping, and building sustainable values for the whole community. The road ahead was still long, but with unity and determination, Jake believed they could create miracles in life. In life, we sometimes face unexpected challenges and difficulties that arise without warning. Jake Thompson, a former soldier who has endured fierce battles, not only struggles with the haunting memories of his past, but also must confront another fight, the battle to protect his own privacy and peace. Under the tense atmosphere and pressure from the Homeowners Association HOA, he discovers an important truth. Solidarity and mutual support are the keys to overcoming any challenge. The tension between Jake and the HOA gradually escalates, affecting not only him, but also spreading throughout the community. The warning letters, threats, and unreasonable regulations have left not only Jake, but all his neighbors feeling anxious and insecure. They realize that if they do not stand up for their rights, they could lose not only their home, but also the future of the neighborhood they have cherished. During those difficult moments, Jake decided not to stand alone. He called on his neighbors to gather together, organizing meetings to connect and share the challenges they were facing. These meetings became not only a platform for expressing outrage towards the HOA, but also an opportunity to form a support network, restoring trust and strength within the community. People began to realize that solidarity was their greatest strength. By sharing his story, Jake not only reassured his neighbors, but also sparked in them a sense of responsibility for their shared living space. They collectively researched residents' rights in their area, discussing the actions taken by the HOA without their consent. The lack of information and concern had created a divide between the residents and the HOA, and now they were striving to rebuild that connection. One of the most important factors in Jake's struggle was his encouragement for neighbors to actively participate in community activities. They were no longer just isolated individuals. They became a unified body, working together to protect the rights and values they cherished. Activities like planting flowers, cleaning parks, and organizing celebratory events began to occur more frequently. These actions not only helped people reconnect with one another, but also fostered a joyful atmosphere that had long been lost due to the HOA. One day, during a weekly meeting, the group of residents proposed a plan, a small protest to express their opposition to the HOA. Jake was the initiator of this idea, but not with a spirit of aggression or challenge, rather with a heartfelt commitment to the community. The protest was not just a display of anger. It was an opportunity for everyone to together affirm their right to live in an environment where their voices were heard and respected. To prepare for the protest, Jake skillfully combined the use of media. He invited local journalists, bloggers, and influencers in the community to help amplify the event's reach. This not only boosted the morale of the residents, but also caught the public's attention, prompting the HOA to take notice of the community's response. Although life was far from easy, Jake realized that every hardship carries a valuable lesson. He learned to listen to and understand the concerns of others, transforming meetings into sharing spaces where everyone felt respected and had a voice. The solidarity among the residents not only helped them overcome difficulties, but also opened up new possibilities for the future. In the following months, Jake and the community faced pressure from the HOA as well as unwanted reactions from local authorities. However, their determination and steadfastness never wavered. They began to recognize that they were not only fighting for their rights, but also to protect the living environment for future generations. From an individual perspective to a collective viewpoint, their steps became stronger and more confident than ever. As time passed, community activities became increasingly diverse and rich. They not only preserved their living space but also organized events that helped bring people closer together, from street parties to outdoor movie screenings. All of this created a joyful, harmonious community that everyone wanted to be a part of. Jake's story serves as a vivid testament that in the most challenging times, people are never alone if they harness the power of solidarity. Mutual support is not only a necessary step, but also a way to maintain positive energy, allowing individuals to trust in their ability to enact change. One beautiful sunny day, the Freedom Garden was inaugurated. It was not just a lush green space, but a symbol of connection and unity among residents. They had come together to plant flowers, care for trees, and enjoy moments together. From previously estranged neighbors, they had become a family, living and thriving together in a healthy environment. Looking back, Jake felt proud, not only of what he had achieved, but also of the community spirit he had helped cultivate. Friendship, mutual support, and unity are values he believes will last forever. From the tears faced in confronting the HOA to the smiles shared during celebration events, Jake knew that life is a journey, and every step carries its own unique significance. In the end, it was precisely the solidarity and perseverance that laid the foundation for a strong community. Not just for Jake, but for all the residents. It became evident that through mutual support, they could confront any challenges life presented. They demonstrated that with unity and love, everything could be overcome, even obstacles that seemed insurmountable. When Jake's and his neighbors' resistance attracted media attention, it sent an electric shock through the guardians of the Homeowners Association HOA. The HOA president, Mrs. Karen, is a woman with a strong voice in the community, but she is also very conservative and steadfast in defending her regulations. The helpful and unexpected actions from the residents made her reconsider her role in the area. Mrs. Karen, who was accustomed to enforcing rules rigidly, now faced increasing pressure from the residents. They not only stood up for their rights, but also demonstrated a strong sense of solidarity in this movement. The system she once trusted now, like a horse tightly tied, was being forced into a corner by what is called the power of the people. Each HOA meeting was no longer a one-sided dialogue, but had turned into a space where everyone could share their opinions, wishes, and sometimes even grievances. After witnessing protests and interviews from journalists, Mrs. Karen could no longer remain passive. She decided to invite Jake and several neighbors to a crucial meeting, hoping to find a suitable way forward for both sides. The meeting was held at a small conference house near the residential area, where everyone could comfortably express their views without fear of interruption. As the residents entered the meeting room, the previously tense atmosphere gradually dissipated. Everyone wanted to contribute to this dialogue, and Jake, the one who had initiated everything, became their representative voice. He began with a brief statement addressing the importance of communication within the community. We are not just people living next to each other. We are part of a larger whole. If we cannot work together, then none of us can thrive. Mrs. Karen, though a bit anxious inside, decided to listen. She acknowledged that HOA regulations may have become too rigid and no longer met the practical needs of the residents. She also admitted that the numerous notification letters and complex regulations sometimes only served to alienate people further. For the first time, she opened up about the pressure she faced in maintaining order and discipline within the community. The dialogue began to unfold vigorously. Residents took turns sharing their thoughts. They not only criticized the regulations, but also proposed changes that could make the community better. One neighbor suggested holding regular meetings between the HOA and residents to ensure everyone had a chance to voice their opinions. Another proposed that the regulations needed to be reviewed and adjusted based on the consensus of all. Mrs. Karen took note of all these suggestions and promised to consider them seriously. She understood that without change, the HOA would struggle to survive in a community that was becoming increasingly united. Since that meeting, Mrs. Karen began to organize regular monthly meetings between the HOA and residents, creating an open space for sharing opinions. Everyone's participation not only helped them feel respected, but also built a trusting relationship between the HOA and residents. This not only reduced conflicts, but also created an opportunity for everyone to work together to improve their living environment. Each meeting became an occasion for all members to gain knowledge, as well as to find solutions to existing problems. The new regulations emerging from these meetings reflected the desires and practical needs of the residents, rather than merely being imposed from above. The Freedom Garden became an integral part of everyone's lives. It symbolized unity where not only flowers bloomed, but also hearts were knitted closer together. Activities there became essential occasions in daily life, such as barbecues, food festivals, or musical performances organized by the residents themselves. Mrs. Karen had changed. With a more open heart, she no longer held her previous conservatism. She participated in community activities, gardening, planting flowers, and engaging in community celebrations. Her presence became a symbol of an HOA that was not just a management organization, but also an essential part of community development. As laughter and music echoed from the Freedom Garden, everyone envisioned a brighter future. Change came not only in how people perceived one another, but also in how they collectively wanted to build a happy living space. The barriers that once separated them had been dismantled, giving way to closer relationships and more sharing. They proved that through communication and understanding, all conflicts could be resolved. Jake, who once only wanted to protect his individual rights, had become a visionary leader for the community. His struggle was not just to reclaim rights, but also to create a better future for everyone. His painful experiences helped him realize that strength does not come from personal power, but from the strength of a united community. The image of Mrs. Karen smiling beside Jake during festive occasions said it all. They were no longer opponents, but friends, working together to build a future. The changes in the HOA are a clear example of how the power of community can create positive differences, not only for each individual, but for everyone around them. Through all that had happened, the community became stronger than ever, ready to face any challenges and difficulties. People understood that only when they were together could they stand firm against any pressure from the outside. The Freedom Garden not only became a refreshing green space, but also nurtured love and unity, making life here more meaningful than ever before. The Freedom Garden is not merely a green space adorned with vibrant flowers. It symbolizes the strength of unity and love within the community. After a relentless battle with HOA, Jake realized that the positive change had transcended himself. It had breathed new life into the entire neighborhood. As people gathered to tend to the garden together, the atmosphere became warm and filled with laughter. Individuals from diverse households who had once lived in isolation transformed into genuine friends, sharing both joys and sorrows from their daily lives. Now, the garden is a venue for meaningful activities. Every weekend, Jake and his neighbors organize a small gathering to care for the plants, water them, and enjoy the fruits of their collective labor. The children in the neighborhood eagerly participate in planting, watering, or simply running around the garden, making the space more vibrant than ever. It serves not only as a garden, but also as a place educating children about the values of caring for plants, responsibility, and the spirit of unity. Adults also find joy in connecting and learning from each other. They began to hold gatherings not only to discuss neighborhood issues, but also to share life stories and invaluable lessons from their families. It's a wonderful opportunity for everyone to exchange ideas, from gardening tips to parenting methods and even traditional recipes. All of this helps families bond, turning mundane evenings into opportunities to know each other better. As each day passes, the garden gradually becomes an indispensable site for the community. It brings beauty to the neighborhood and serves as the perfect gathering spot for barbecues and celebrations. These events, ranging from small family get-togethers to large festivals involving all residents, create a vibrant, warm atmosphere filled with human connection. Each outdoor table is laden with food, from simple dishes to family specialties, showcasing a delicious variety of culinary diversity. People slowly come to realize that the garden has become an essential place for fostering connections. It is not just a space for creativity and care. It is also a sanctuary that helps alleviate stress. Dispelling the anxieties of daily life, they gather to share joyous tales, laugh together, and sometimes cry over memories of the past and lost moments. Moreover, beyond fostering connection, the garden also serves as a practical classroom for younger generations. Parents not only teach their children how to plant, but also help them understand the importance of environmental protection and sustainable development. Activities like these enable children not only to gain a clearer understanding of nature, but also to develop good habits for the future. Here, the quality of life for everyone is enhanced not only by the garden's beauty, but also by the support, kindness, and friendship that everyone builds together. They realize that no one can live in isolation within a shared environment without creating cherished memories. Gatherings and shared moments caring for the garden are etched in everyone's minds as priceless memories. Looking toward the future, Jake feels proud of what he has achieved with his community. The Freedom Garden is not merely a place that adds color to the neighborhood. It is a legacy of unity and love. It has become a symbol of the power of humanity, when standing together representing a strong community that withstands the challenges life presents. Increasingly, Jake sees that a piece of land can transform into a garden, not only through soil, but also through the hearts of those who inhabit it. People have learned to live not only for themselves, but also for others, creating a peaceful and friendly environment where everyone feels welcomed and loved. This change has also sparked new motivation for other activities in the area. Cultural and sporting events have begun to emerge more frequently, from sports tournaments to small concerts and outdoor movie screenings. All aim to elevate the community's spiritual life and connect people, turning the neighborhood into a desirable place to live. The foundation for this sustainable development lies within the very individuals of the community. They gradually recognize that their strength lies in unity and sharing. During the toughest times, they have learned to stand by one another, safeguarding the things they hold dear. The change is not just superficial. It extends to the relationships they build. When a person starts to open their heart, sharing not only pain but also happiness, they enrich their life and those around them. The Freedom Garden has become the beginning of new journeys and grand dreams they will pursue together. Jake, once a veteran burdened by lingering concerns, has now become a leader within his community, a connector bringing people together. He has learned that strength lies not only in weapons or physical power, but also in a warm heart and community support. His life has turned a new page where he dedicates time not only to himself, but also to others, working together to create the most peaceful place, not only for the present, but also for future generations. The Freedom Garden is not merely a patch of lush greenery. It has become a vibrant symbol of the power of community solidarity. The blooming flowers and cool tree-lined paths bear witness to the revival, not just of Jake, but also of the residents surrounding him. Each seedling sprouting here carries within it a story, a memory and a dream of a place where people live harmoniously together. 2 years after the battle against the Homeowners Association, HOA concluded the atmosphere in the neighborhood seemed filled with vitality and new energy. The garden had become the ideal gathering spot for families where they hosted barbecues, cultural festivals, and sports gatherings. From the smallest actions like watering the plants together to larger events, all contributed to strengthening the bonds between residents, providing them with more reasons to meet and share precious moments. Jake had transformed into a connector, nurturing not only flowers, but also fostering love and closeness among neighbors. Each time he organized an event, he always invited everyone to join, regardless of age or circumstances. He understood that such gatherings were not merely social events, they were bridges. The very bricks building a stronger and more united community. As summer arrived, Jake, along with his neighbors, began to implement a special idea, the Flower and Community Festival. This festival was not just about showcasing beautiful flowers. It was also an occasion for everyone to display all the achievements they had accomplished together. People brought their families' traditional dishes, then enjoyed and mingled together, creating a joyful and warm feast. Laughter echoed everywhere, and friendships and bonds deepened among them. At this time, the garden was not just a place for flowers, but a cultural space where people could learn from one another. Elderly folks shared old stories, while young families introduced fresh ideas. Jake, as the organizer, opened an informal school where everyone could learn skills from gardening to cooking, from arts to crafts. Each lesson became an opportunity for connection and the creation of cherished memories in everyone's hearts. The Freedom Garden was not just a place for planting flowers. It was also a nurturing ground for dreams and aspirations. Many found new motivation and began to pursue passions they had long forgotten. One of Jake's neighbors, Maria, decided to start a baking class where everyone could learn to create delicious treats from flour sugar and fresh fruits. She not only shared knowledge, but also brought joy and creativity to the entire community. In May of that year, Jake organized a gardening competition to encourage people to participate in caring for the communal garden, enhancing healthy competition among families. The prizes were not materially significant, but mostly focused on recognition and small tokens. Yet, more importantly, it was about the efforts and passions everyone poured into their shared work. These were memorable moments where everyone worked together, laughed together, and built and fulfilled dreams for a better living space. As he gazed at the flourishing garden, Jake felt happiness flooding his heart. He realized that not only were the flowers blooming, but the feelings and relationships among people were also forming and flourishing. Although he had faced difficulties and challenges in the past, the painful memories had now become just a part of his journey. Jake found himself within the recovery of the community. He was no longer a lone fighter, but an indispensable part of a larger story, where responsibility and love connected everyone together. One afternoon, as the sun began to set behind the rows of trees, Jake sat on a bench in the garden, watching the children playing around and the adults tending to the flowers. He felt the peace and happiness saturating the air. It was something he had previously only dared to dream about. His life was no longer dictated by barriers or threats from external powers. He had found a new family within the community he actively cultivated. The changes in the HOA also reflected the strength of unity in the community. Recognizing the enthusiasm and commitment of the residents, the HOA representatives even implemented significant reforms. Meetings with residents became a space where everyone could express their opinions and ideas about the new regulations. This not only fostered better relationships between the HOA and the residents, but also encouraged them to engage in decisions affecting their daily lives. All of this formed a legacy, not merely of flowers. It was a symbol of strength, perseverance, and love among the members. The Freedom Garden had become a gathering place for those seeking a peaceful and happy life. Anyone passing by could feel the positive energy and the spirit of connection that this area offered. The development of the community began to create lasting impacts. More cultural activities, sporting events, and concerts became increasingly popular, attracting not only residents but also those from outside the area to participate. This not only enriched the cultural life but also created an inviting space for everyone. Thanks to the connectivity and sincere affection before long, the name Freedom Garden became a point of pride for the entire district, symbolizing the striving and aspirations for a better life. In the end, Jake found not only personal joy but also a greater purpose in his life. He realized that each of us has a mission in this life, not just to live for ourselves, but to build, nurture, and care for the relationships we have. The Freedom Garden became a place where he could inspire future generations, helping them understand that unity, love, and perseverance are the keys to overcoming any challenges. Jake's presence beside the community affirmed that every person has the ability to change the lives around them, no matter how great the challenges may be. As long as we stand together, support one another, and trust each other, we will always find a way toward the light. The garden offers everyone hope that the future will always be bright, as long as they do not give up on their dreams and continually strive for better things. As people gathered around the garden, they carried within themselves a sense of gratitude and respect for each person who contributed to this journey. It was not just about the flowers, but about humanity, about connection and love in every drop of sweat, every smile. The Freedom Garden truly transformed into a warm flame, igniting hope and happiness for everyone, encompassing the past, present, and future. The Freedom Garden, nurtured by Jake and the community, has become a symbol of the power of unity. Each blooming flower and each golden fruit carries within it the stories of the people here. Those who have had to struggle for their right to live and love. The garden is not just a place for plants to grow. It is also a space where friendship, family bonds, and life lessons are sown. As the garden began to flourish, the local community blossomed in tandem. Cultural and sporting events were held regularly, drawing a large crowd of residents to participate. Those small festivals became opportunities for everyone to meet, converse, and celebrate the beautiful things in life together. Gone were the worries about complicated HOA regulations. Instead, there was a feeling of freedom and happiness, which is precisely what Jake had envisioned since the very first days of moving here. In the afternoons, Jake often sat in the garden, watching everyone work together, chatting and laughing. Some families brought picnics while young children ran and played. Their laughter mingled with the birds singing from the branches above. It was in these simple moments that Jake realized what truly matters in life. He discovered not only personal joy but also the essence of community spirit, cooperation, and sharing. Once again, Jake participated in HOA meetings, not as an antagonist but as an active member of the community. He convinced them of the importance of listening to each resident's opinions to create an environment where everyone felt their voice was valued. People became more aware of their power, and mutual acceptance became the primary criterion for all council decisions. Looking back, Jake realized that the Freedom Garden is not just a physical space, but also a symbol of the cultural and social values that the community has preserved. Regular meetings immersed in nature created a strong connection among the people. They were no longer merely neighbors, but had become a large family united in the fight for the existence and prosperity of their area. Furthermore, the joyous activities not only enriched the spiritual life, but also fortified the strength of the community. Flower markets, sporting events, and fundraising art performances drew significant participation from residents. Together, they built moments of happiness and beautiful memories, making life in this area more meaningful than ever. Jake also decided to organize small classes on gardening, sharing his knowledge and skills with others. He wanted everyone not only to love nature, but also to understand how to protect and preserve it. This not only beautified each home, but also created a playground that connected people with one another. Moreover, the relationship between Jake and his neighbors changed significantly. They were no longer just people living close to each other, but rather close friends who supported one another in times of trouble. Jake understood that it was the unity and love that transformed this area into a wonderful place to live, where everyone could become the best version of themselves. Through months of hardship, everyone together built a legacy that extends beyond the garden and cultural activities. It is a warm community where understanding and love are always present. The Freedom Garden has become an emblem of resilience and solidarity, affirming that the ability to overcome challenges depends on the strength of the community. Jake realized that positive change does not come from grand gestures, but from small actions. Smiles, greetings, and help when needed. This is what he had been seeking since returning home, and what helped him regain his faith in life. From then on, Jake's community became a shining example for other neighborhoods. They proved that regardless of the challenges faced, if people hold hands and work towards a common goal, anything can be achieved. The Freedom Garden is not just a space for plants to thrive. It is also a place where humanity and love bloom, encouraging everyone to grow together. Thanks to these collective efforts, from the smallest tasks to grand initiatives, the area was revived not merely due to individual struggles, but because of the community's solidarity. This made life here not just happy, but filled with meaning.